Good evening. Welcome to the Warrant Committee meeting slash public forum of the budget of May 4th, 2026. This is 2 nights before the annual town meeting starts. Karen, can you call roll to call us to order?
We have Jay Fundling, Nicole Boyson is on Zoom, Elaine Craighead is here, Lorraine D is here, Grace Doherty is on Zoom, Julia Maxwell is here, Brian McGuire on Zoom, and Nicholas Tangney and Cecile Yang are here. You have a quorum.
Okay. So the first order of business is not the budget forum, which is why most people are here. First order of business in the agenda was a catch-all of anything that's coming up for the town meeting that we need to address. And I sent the warrant committee members a proposed, I'm gonna share my screen, I'm gonna talk while doing things, which is always a problem. A proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw. The signed zoning bylaw, the amendment was that it previously said, there's a lot on my screen here, but on the right-hand side of my screen is what's in the warrant, which said the building commissioner, when they get an application within 10 days, will determine if it's complete, and then put it on to the sign review committee, who will then have 60 days to respond to it or not. The proposed amendment, I think the building commissioner raised, what if I'm on vacation? What if something comes up? I might not be able to do it within 7 days. So we've got this amendment, I believe it's sponsored by the planning board, which is to change the building commissioner's time from 7 days to 30 days. Did people get a chance to review this? Okay. You may have reviewed this more than I did. Oh, we've got one of our sign by law experts coming in. Gotcha. No, come on. When I read it, it does look like this could delay the whole process. Someone mentioned to me sort of off the cuff, oh, the total time it takes won't be affected. It does look to me like the total time it takes could be delayed by changing this 7 days to 30 days. Did anyone look at that? Have any thoughts about it? Oh, yeah, Joy?
No, just question, who were the experts for this one?
Larry and Macy.
Okay, I guess I would be interested in hearing them or you if Macy's not here.
Honestly, it just sounds to me that like the building weighed in at some point late in the game and said 7 days isn't enough. I don't see that it really changes that much, and it makes the whole process a little bit longer, but not that much longer, it makes it, turns it from like 60 days to maybe 90 days if you add it all up, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a huge change to me.
Okay.
If that's what the building commissioner needs, then, he knows how his end of the process works better than the rest of us.
Okay. Cecile?
On item B, doesn't it say 60 days of receipt of the completed application form? So would we need to change that, or is it gonna be like less time for the sign?
Well, that's what, when I read it, it's 60 days if they receive it from the building commissioner. So to me, that says the building commissioner does his work, passes it on to the sign review committee. Sorry to ambush you, I know you just walked in.
Yeah. Get my stuff together here, Jay. Yeah, no, that's what it sounds like to me. That's why I said 60 to 90. So it's like 67 days now, because it's 60 days for the sign review committee. 7 days for the building commissioner. I mean, yeah, I honestly don't, like I said, I assume that most of it comes from the building commissioner, and he knows if he needs 30 days, then.
I spoke to Chair Hall and she said that, his comment was, what if I'm on vacation? Then I can't do it in 7 days, something like that.
That's right.
So for the broader context, obviously town meeting is 2 days from now. We can take action on this now. I guess we have a couple options. We can take action on this now and say, we agree with this. And then when people walk into town meeting, they will get what's called a green sheet, a green piece of paper showing here's an amendment to what the warrant committee is recommending. We can say no to this now. We can say we don't like it. We can take no action tonight, in which case I don't know if there'd be something handed out. It certainly wouldn't be handed out and told people, here's the warrant committee's change recommendation. They'd have to wait till No, the meeting started to hear our recommendation. So if we're comfortable acting on this tonight, then town meeting members would be informed the minute they walk in. Things would go smoother. That's not a reason for us to take action if we're not ready to take action. Any more discussion? Or do we have a motion? Brian, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just, it seems like a long time, like they already get, I didn't really hear the reasoning for it because I couldn't hear well,
Okay.
but they got 60 days and then another 30 on top of that?
Yeah, so step one would be the building commissioner previously had 7 days to determine, yes, the application is complete. This would change it to 30, and then another 60 days after that. And
Yeah, it seems like a long time.
yeah, the reasoning was that the building commissioner, one argument was if they're on vacation, then they literally can't do it, you know, for a week, they literally can't do it in 7 days.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
Now, is there a number between 7 and 30 that we could make up? I
Can
don't
you do
know.
14?
I might wanna talk to someone involved before making a change like that.
I mean, I think in practice, it's very rarely gonna go 90 days. You know, they'll probably review it within a couple of days of receipt, send it off to the center review committee, we'll meet within a month usually.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope, is that,
Yeah.
you know, we have people in town hall who pride themselves on doing a good job, and
I don't wanna overthink this, but if the building commissioner gets hit by a bus, like who's the next in charge, next in line?
I
I
think-
imagine.
I think that something would be accommodated.
Like Nick Milano would appoint somebody, I imagine.
Well, couldn't Nick Milano then appoint, or the building commissioner appoint some sort of designee to be able to handle these things?
That's what I'm wondering, if
Oh,
if
you're
the,
saying-
if the example
Yeah.
is they're on vacation,
Right.
well, surely everything doesn't have to come to a screeching halt if the building, one person is out of commission for whatever reason. Like, so that if we are basing this 7 versus 30 or something between on this idea of someone being on vacation, is there a backup plan for when that person is out for whatever reason, the building commissioner, that is?
Okay. So you're saying
Again, at the
this
risk
should-
of
this should be a
overthinking.
problem, this should be an issue that they can address even if.
I would hope so, I guess, but I don't know.
So what you're saying is we may not need this change, because they should just be able to deal with it.
Yes, or I would be in favor of like something between 7 and 30. 30 feels a lot for a potential vacation.
Nikki, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. It seems to me that Julia makes a great point, although the bus comment is funny. It's not funny, it's terrible, but sorry. So maybe the business, so a couple things, like 7 days seems plenty if the building commissioner has a designee, perhaps we change it to the building commissioner or her designee and then keep it at 7. But 7 seems to me, again, just fine.
Okay, so going back to what our options are, if we have questions, which, you know, whether can it be a designee, can it be 14 days? Or just somehow reassure us that 30 days is correct. If we have questions and we're not ready to act on this, we can not act tonight. We'd wanna make sure all our questions are in line so that someone can answer them in the next 2 days.
I would be in favor of not acting.
Okay.
Personally, it's fine.
Alright, so unless I hear a motion, it sounds like if someone would like to make a motion, they can, otherwise we will not take action tonight, and we've recorded our questions. Any other questions you have, please send them my way and we'll get those answered within 2 days and keep town meeting as informed as we can.
So then what happens at town meeting again then? So this is,
Um,
so there's no green sheet, it's just a.
yeah, I don't know, I mean, they might hand out a green sheet that just says, here's a possible amendment that might be coming your way. But it won't say the warrant committee has changed their recommendation. And then we'll meet before town meeting at 6:30 in the first floor of the high school and, you know. So if I'm to sum it up, our questions are, you know, why is this needed at all? Can they get their designee? If it is needed, can it be somewhat less than 30 days? Is that summary of our questions?
Sure.
Okay,
I'm fine with 30 days personally, but I won't make a motion.
okay. Yeah, we'll keep town meeting informed. I don't think they'll be confused. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. What I'm gonna share. So we're moving on to the other item for tonight, which is an open forum on the town budget. So we've got people here in person. I don't know, Karen, do we have guests online?
We have a couple.
Okay, that's great. Okay, great.
Yep, you have 3.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to share my screen of the PowerPoint. Okay. So this is something that I don't know that the Warrant Committee has done in recent years, but between the override last year and the concerns of the budget between January and March of this year and looking forward and seeing where the budget is going, seemed like there was a lot of questions, a lot of issues about the budget. And I wanted to have a forum that invites people in and presents to the public, maybe a little more in depth than what I'll present at town meeting, and has some back and forth, has some questions, and just to show you what we're seeing for the budget and what we're seeing for the budget forecast. Let's see, slideshow. Okay. So a couple of sort of how I see tonight going. I've got 3 designated stopping points for questions. I didn't know how many people would be here. We're not overflowing with an angry mob, so that's good. I had 3.
We don't know they're not angry.
They're a cheerful mob.
Got my pitchfork.
I have 3 points where I was gonna stop with questions. I'm gonna say that's limited to 10 minutes. Again, we're not an overflowing crowd here, so that shouldn't be an issue. At the end of the presentation, I'll take as many questions as you want. Let's limit it to 9 PM. I don't know if that's gonna be an issue, but let's just say that ahead of time. I will say, so sort of big picture, what I'm gonna talk about tonight, I'd say it's about 25% talking about this year's budget that we're gonna be presenting to town meeting. About 75% is gonna be what we're seeing coming up for coming years. Now I did have sort of thinking about what this could be and what I'm prepared to talk about tonight. I had a resident send me questions today that were very good questions. They were like, oh, can you talk about how you're managing costs? Can you talk about how you're keeping costs down? And my response was, those are very good questions. That's not the kind of thing I was prepared to talk about. So I apologize if you come here and have questions and I'm not ready for them. We'll roll with it together. You can ask whatever you want. I just might not be ready to answer it. So it'll mostly be talking about what is the budget that town meeting is gonna be voted on, and then what do we see coming in the future. And I say that the slides with the star are gonna be the ones that I remove for town meetings. I'm gonna give them a shorter presentation. In reality, you're gonna be my guinea pigs. If you don't like some slides, then I'll take those out for town meeting. If you really like some, I mean, that's less likely.
Thumbs down.
We'll see. Yeah. I'll vote. So I've got this slide starting out. I know it's a lot of words, but this was sort of, for me, this was my North Star for the budget process this year. The Mass Department of Revenue looked at Milton in 2013. This was long before we had a strong town administrator. This was when the Warrant Committee made the budget themselves. And the Department of Revenue said, guys, you need a strong town administrator. You don't need 15 residents making the budget. And, I bolded the parts that I especially like, while we're still a watchdog, we don't get in, rather than get into the minutia of individual department budgets, we look at the high level, spending priorities, reserves, fiscal policies. So it's still, is not a 100% clear guideline of what our role is, but it helped give some guidelines. So we're not looking at, okay, how much is the library spending on copy paper? We're saying, okay, big picture, how's the budget going? Okay, so let's start out. Where are we? Did I get the right year? Yes, I got the right year. Good. So we're looking at the FY27 budget. That's the budget for the year that starts this July 1st. And where are we? Last year we passed an override, $9.5 million. $8.8 million of that went to fund level service expenses. It went to the general budget, and it was just to fund a continuation of the services we were already providing. Now, $700,000 of that override went to the operating budget stabilization fund. Now, it's understandable if you've never heard the term operating budget stabilization fund. It was part of last year's override, it was something that came up in last year's town meeting, but it wasn't discussed very much. It's fine if you've never heard of it. I'm put together this presentation as if you'd never heard of it. By the end of the night, you're gonna know a lot more about it. It's a fund that is a way that Milton and other towns use to go between overrides with minimal disruption of service. I don't think there was a whole lot of discussion of it last year, but you'll be hearing quite a bit about it tonight. This was a significant override that we passed, and it was clearly stated at the time, it was to fund level service, the same level of service as before, not increased services. Now, one thing that happened before it was passed is the town administrator presented a forecast to the select board last March that showed the town with that override getting through till 2030 before we'd need another override. Now, one thing about that forecast that was presented last spring is it assumed 2.5% pay increases for town and school employees. That number is not realistic. That is not consistent with historic trends in this town. It is not consistent with the union contracts we have with our employees. The number made the numbers fit. It made the numbers last to 2030, but it wasn't realistic of what the cost increases in this town are. So that led to a problem this year. This year, we're at January, and we look, and the preliminary budget was $7 million below the level service request from the town and school departments. And people said, how could this be? How could we have an override last year, and now we're already short? One of the key reasons is the forecast we looked at last year wasn't realistic for the cost increases. Another reason was because when the town administrator starts putting together the budget in January, he understandably makes very cautious assumptions about things. Two big ones are how much are we gonna get in state aid, how much is health insurance gonna increase. Those were very cautious assumptions in the month of January. By the time we got to the month of March, both of those were updated. Both of those were quite a bit better. What had been I don't remember off the top of my head, $2 or $3 million shortfall, it now became a $1 million shortfall, again, short of what the town and school requested. So once we got that information, we could put together a final budget. It still was shorter than what was requested by about $1 million. So that $1 million shortfall below what was requested, that came out of the school's request entirely. So you might ask, why did it come out of the school's request? Why wasn't it spread more evenly across town? I'd say two reasons are, one reason is because the school's request was a higher percentage than all the other departments. The town departments as a whole requested, I believe it was around, a little more than 3.5%. Schools asked for 5.2%. And also the school request included in that was a $1 million buildup of financial reserves for emergencies that come up later. That's prudent financially. We thought maybe there was some flexibility in there. And so the town and schools working together, the school committee had a final plan that incorporated $1 million lower in their requested budget. And I'm paraphrasing, please don't think I'm speaking for the administration or the school committee, but it seemed to be that they had a plan where they could find savings that would not be a detriment to classroom instruction. So that's where we ended up $1 million short to the schools. Okay, so that's that year. Here's a slide that the town financial director put together for me. Just big picture, where are the numbers? Our revenues went up, and this is gonna be a theme for the night. Our revenues went up by 3.2%. That's, the large drivers are taxes go up 2.5% on current properties. And then when new properties are built, people add onto their houses, that's called new growth, that gets added to tax rolls. That most years brings the 2.5 up to about 3%. So our revenues went up by 3.2%. Our expenses, town and schools both went up by about the same amount. Now I told you the school's request was a lot higher, but we held it down, so they both went up by about the same percent. The shared expenses which a large part of that is health insurance. Health insurance by itself went up by 8% this year. Shared expenses went up by 4.5%. So you can see, our revenues went up by a little over 3%. Our expenses went up by a little under 4%. And that's even after not satisfying all the requests. Now, you might say, okay, there's a difference there. Where did that come from? Again, I'm teasing a little bit. I'll say more about this in a minute. But I mentioned there was an operating budget stabilization fund that helps us get from one override to the next. I'll be saying much more about that in a few minutes, but just for now, let's say we pulled money out of that fund to fill the difference, which is how it's intended to be used. And I will say these and essentially all the numbers I'll be talking about tonight, these are operating budget numbers. And when I say operating budget, I mean as opposed to one-time funds. So one-time funds mostly comes in the form of free cash. Every year, if we spend a little bit less the previous year than we expected and we bring in a little bit more than we expected and we're a little bit better than budget, that's called free cash, and that's viewed as one-time funds. It can and should be spent on one-time things like capital purchases, other one-time expenses. So one-time expenses are not in virtually any of the numbers you'll see here tonight. I do want to take a bit of a sidetrack to talk about state aid, because that's a big portion of our budget. It's, the state gives money to all towns and cities for their municipal budget, and it's been lacking in the past 20 years. You can see the Mass Municipal Association, which is what it sounds like, an association of cities and towns across Massachusetts. They studied this in 2025 and put out a couple publications that show just how the state is not giving us enough state aid. And you can see, going back to the Great Recession, if you look at the gray line, that's the state aid that we got in 2007 before the Great Recession. And if it had gone up with inflation, it would have gone like this. Instead, we had the Great Recession, state aid went down, okay? They had to make a cut somewhere, and then it did not go back up. And getting to the point where in 2026, we're getting, we as, not as Milton, but as a whole, the whole state, we're getting as much state aid now as we did in 2007. Not adjusted for inflation, just period, the same number. So the state has really fallen behind in giving cities and towns state aid over the past couple decades. People are pushing for this to be improved, and that could make a difference in our budget, but it's one reason things are tight. I just wanted to take a look at the history. So what does our budget look like? How much has our budget grown? I looked over the past, 12 years. I think those are the ones that were most convenient for me to grab off the internet. The annual growth rate year over year, average, a little less than 5%. So what we spend on this town goes up by 4.9% year over year. And then the next slide, and this is one of the key slides of this evening. This is looking forward. So as I said, our revenue this year grew about 3%, and that's what we expect. We expect it to grow by 2.5% because of Prop 2.5. That's how much our taxes can go up. Add another about 0.5% for new buildings going up, people adding onto their houses, adding to the tax base. And year over year, you get about a 3% increase. And year over year, our forecast expenses grow about, I have 4.7%. Now, do I want it to grow 4.7%? As I said, I got questions from a resident today asking, how can we control our costs? I think that's beyond the scope of what I'm prepared to talk about tonight. A lot of what we'll be talking about tonight is not necessarily what we want, it's what we're seeing is actually happening. And I'll go back to the previous slide. Over the past 12 years, our expenses have grown about 4.9% a year, forecasting 4.7%, pretty darn close to each other. But if our expenses are going up faster than our revenue, something's got to give. And, one thing that has to give is we periodically need to have overrides. When, how much, how, that's all to be discussed. But I'm going to stop here for the first of the question session. Does anyone in the room or online have questions for what we talked about so far? Please,
Not necessarily about what we talked about, it's about budget.
that's fine, that's fine. If I can't answer, I'll tell you I can't answer.
Should I come up here?
Please do.
Jake, could you ask people to identify themselves?
Yeah, can you say your name and address?
John Cohane, town meeting member, precinct 7.
Okay, address? I don't know the rules.
73
so-
in First Street.
Okay, thank you.
My question is about why budgets are supposed to be accurate. And the school budget is the biggest one, so I chose that to look at first.
Okay.
And if you look at you doing the same thing, I looked at the since 2021 to 2026, the average increase has been 6.4% school budget.
Mhm.
And we are increasing the school budget this year by 3.76, 3.8%. They asked for 5.2, you showed that. I wonder why, and I understand there's a, you're about to start a group with the Warrant Committee and the town administrator to work on revising the forecast and dealing with the operational budget stabilization fund. But it basically seems like the reality is that the school budget really is going to be what is budgeted plus the stabilization fund. That's, if you do the math, no, but I mean,
I'm not following.
if you do the math, that's how much money they're gonna need more. If they follow at the 6.4%, which, you know, we're talking about reality, and that's what it's been for the past 5 years, they're gonna need that much more money, almost exactly the stabilization fund, to meet fiscal 27's budget. You know, using those percentages and much, and I just wonder why, you know, I guess there's a little psychology in it too, you don't give them everything they want, but, you know, why they're asking for 5.2, we're giving them 3.7, the reality is someplace even higher than that. How accurate is our budget?
I will say, so the joint budget committee, which is a couple select board members, a couple school committee members, a couple warrant committee members, the schools gave us a projected forecast for the next 4 years, and it was 5.2% for every year, except, as I said, they're setting aside money in a reserve account, except the year they pay that down, they pay that off, it would be a little bit less. So they gave us a number, it was largely based on, I mean, they haven't negotiated their contracts yet, so you have to sort of guess. You know, so much of this is driven by salary, and all the salary is driven by contracts.
81%, right?
So they have to guess what the contract's gonna be, but they made a guess, and so they gave us, and it's essentially 5.2% for the next several years. So that's what I've baked into, you know, that's baked into this number right here. I'm not sure if I got your question.
Well, the budget increase between FY 26 and FY 27 is only 3.8,
Yes.
and
Because-
that's not real.
I don't know what so they asked for 5.2% and we said, we'll give you $1 million less than that. Some of that reduction hit the amount they wanted to set aside in their reserve account. Some of that led to layoffs or not filling positions. So again, your question is,
I just question the reality. Budgets are supposed to be accurate and real, and it just seems to me that we increased at 6.4% over the past 3 years to all of a sudden think we're gonna be 3.7 is
well, I mean, if
an unrealistic budget.
assuming town meeting votes for what's in the warrant, that's what they're going to get. They will get 3 point whatever percent more than they got last year,
Plus
period.
operational stabilization money.
No, No.
Where are they gonna get the money that they don't have? Cause they're gonna spend more than that. That's my,
I-
I guess my point is,
no, I'm saying they're gonna get what they got budgeted. That's what they're gonna get for FY 27.
so I guess my then next is, how do I fall? And I can ask Joanne too, but I see in the bullets for that they're trying to be more open with things and do things more quarterly and stuff. I think it'd behoove us all and to pay attention to that quarterly information that's coming in.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know the
yeah.
school committee recently reviewed the third quarter information, but I'll admit I haven't looked at it, but
Yeah, yeah.
came out.
Okay, I just did, my point.
I-
Thanks, thank you.
I appreciate the discussion.
Oh, and I do wanna say too, thank you so much. This is such a big job. I mean, of all the jobs in city, the town, you put in the most hours, I know from Steve.
I don't know, I'd say the planning board may have us beat.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Any other questions on this? Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Former warrant committee colleague?
Yep.
Can you say your name and address?
Steve Geister, 50 Canton Ave. So I know it's not in play tonight, but the question I want to ask is, make it public, is who, what, and when do we have the ability to question expenses and reduction of those expenses if needed?
Mhm.
I haven't bought a truck for 2 years because I had a $9 million override the other year. We all are tightening our belts in town, but nobody that works in this town wants to tighten the belt. So I don't know, what's the vehicle? I went to the budget meeting this morning, or the budget committee meeting this morning, and they talked about changing the verbiage of level service budget, so it makes more sense. They didn't talk about expenses or how to manage it or any of those things, and that conversations never came up. I brought it up when I was on Warrant Committee, I brought it up on a regular basis, and I reviewed the school committee's budget as a subcommittee, and I never got any answers or any, what kind of things can we do? I mean, we gotta figure out a way, we just can't keep saying it's level and, we can't let teachers go, we can't do this, we can't do that. People can't afford it, it's getting to a point, so, I don't know, I just wanna make, I mean, I know that's not your job here, but
I appreciate that.
somebody's gotta do it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, and to some extent, it is, that slide I had at the beginning, to some extent, the warrant committee does have a role in that. I'm not prepared to talk about it tonight, that doesn't mean it's not the warrant committee's role at all, but, we're still the town's financial watchdog. And there's, the school committee is elected to, among other things, they oversee the school's budget. The select board oversees the budgets of everybody else, so, it might sound like I'm saying, oh, everybody might be pointing at everybody else saying it's, their responsibility. There is a little bit of that, I'll admit. It is partly our role, it is partly the select board and, school committee's role. Okay, thank you, so, thank you.
Can I also just say something briefly in response to that? The schools did cut almost 8 full FTEs this year to bridge that gap. So cuts were made, and those decisions were made with pretty I don't know if I would say extensive public feedback, but there was a forum that they held where people could go. I know they considered strongly the communication they received from Milton residents, so I am also on the school committee, the finance subcommittee, and I really commended them, the school committee, for their responsiveness to their proposed cuts. I thought it was a fairly transparent process and that they were very open to receiving the feedback.
Did they cut them in the end or not?
Yeah, they had to.
Great.
And it looked a lot different. It looked different at the end than it did at the beginning because they listened to that feedback from members of the town. So I don't think the narrative that they're not willing to make any cuts is true. They had to, and they did. Nobody wants to see that happen,
No,
but
of course not.
they did.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Margaret Carrolls, 19 Gibbons Street, Precinct 4, town meeting member. This is maybe just a comment, and maybe you do have some information for me, but to me, it seems like the issue is state aid and healthcare, which feel beyond our control. And, but you had said there are people trying to do things about it. Who are those people, and how can we get involved? And how can we maybe put citizens' anger and effort and action and passion towards that instead of fighting with each other about things?
Okay. For state aid, yeah, I would point you to, and I realize this is small, I'll put this document up on the website. Mass Municipal Association had 2 documents called A Perfect Storm and Navigating the Storm, which went into this in detail. Again, they're sort of what they sound like. They're a group
Yeah.
that represents municipalities towards the state. I do, and this is just going off memory, a month or 2 ago, someone came to speak to the select board, and I don't know if they're associated with Mass Municipal Association or somebody, but they were like, we're from this other town, we're really trying to pressure the legislature to give more state aid. I believe the Mass Municipal Association, their slogan is $351 million for 351 communities. Very catchy. That doesn't answer your question as to how can we, talk to our legislators and get more state aid. I don't know.
No, I know you don't have the answer, but I just wanted to put it out there.
I will also say this is timely. The Globe has an article published today about, the headline is "Towns and Cities are ringing the alarm bells, prompting Massachusetts Senate call to increase local aid." So there is a group that is referenced in there that you could look into who's advocating.
Great, thank you. And Jay, can you minimize the pictures on the side, just so we can read?
Can I? I don't know.
Just up the
Is it-
line
And
at
I
the
don't know if
top.
I do that or if,
I don't know if I can either.
It's just click on that,
Click on the
click on the line at the
I
top.
did it on mine and it didn't.
Oh, okay.
you drag it?
There.
Yeah, no, I did it on mine.
Oh.
All right,
From the Phoenix.
the solution.
Thank you.
Now let's see what it says. What did it say?
Changes everything.
Which part?
The state aid fund.
It's poetry.
What he said.
State aid, low, bad, high, good. Okay, so moving on, stopping that question session. This is sort of my caveats. Depending on your point of view, I either was or I am an actuary. I have to give caveats around on my forecasts. All models are wrong, but some models are useful. One thing I can absolutely promise you about any forecast I give you tonight is that it will not be correct. But hopefully it'll be the best guess and hopefully it'll be close and give us something to work with and coming forward. It's supposed to be a reasonable forecast, and then once we have this forecast, we can look at it next year, say, all right, was it high, was it low, and explain the differences. You know, the fact that the expense growth I'm seeing is similar to historic average makes me feel better about what I'm seeing. I listed some of the most major assumptions. You know, state aid going up by 2.5 or 3%. New growth, I'm expecting about $1 million per year. Health insurance, 8%. That's what it was this year. Going from FY '26 to FY '27 is an 8% increase. Again, I'm a former actuary. Forecasting health insurance inflation is witchcraft, so the best I could do was take what we got now.
8% seems, that's very high though, right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I'm gonna talk about this later. I'd say it's high for the long term. I mean, it's just some of these slides, I'm gonna be looking 7 years out. If we have 8% inflation for 7 years, we've got bigger problems. But for next year, for the year after that, I didn't feel comfortable saying anything less than 8%. So maybe that's a little bit of conservatism, or maybe just being cautious. And getting back to sort of some of the comments earlier and sort of some of my comments earlier, the school department gave us their forecast. It's 5.2% with the dip when they, in the year that they fully fund their reserves. And town departments, about 3.75% pay increase, 3% expenses increase. This is what I, blame who you want, thinks is likely to happen. I'm not saying this is what I want to happen. I'm not saying I'm so happy the schools are getting 1.5% higher than the other town departments. It's not what I want, it's what I think is going to happen, and we'll go from there. So. This is one with the orange star. I thought that was too much detail for town meeting, but good for the, you know, it's good for the people who showed up here tonight. Thank you very much. This is your bonus. Moving forward, I told you I was gonna talk a lot about the operating budget stabilization fund.
Hey, Jay, I'm sorry to interrupt like this.
Yes, please do.
I actually think that last slide, you should have that at the town meeting. You started, but don't you want to show that stuff?
I'm open to feedback.
Sorry.
You know, the more you show to 250 of your best friends, the more each one of those friends is gonna have an opinion on it. Not hiding it, it's here right now.
That 8% health insurance is a really important thing, a message to get out to people.
Okay,
Because people have heard anecdotally that the health insurance is high this year.
okay,
Actually seeing the numbers
alright.
useful, I think.
So we got some feedback for leaving it in. Thank you very much. The Operating Budget Stabilization Fund, what is it? I'm assuming you've never heard of it. It's a fund, Milton has one. Milton has one, other towns have them. We set this up to help us get from one override to the next without cutting services. This is a mechanism that other towns use to get from override to override. Now, recall the graph we saw a few slides ago of the cost going up more than revenue. So how do we deal with that? So in the past, I haven't been in Milton as long as some of you, but what I remember from other override intervening periods is we might have an override one year. And maybe that would have enough of a cushion to get us through year one and year two. Then in year three, again, costs are going up faster than revenue. Maybe in year three, we close the library on Sundays and we lay off some art teachers. In year four, we close the library on Saturdays and we lay off the music teachers. And then in year five, we say, well, we can't take any more cuts, so we'll have an override. And then we reopen the library and we hire back the art teachers and the music teachers. That's sort of how we did it in the past to deal with those diverging lines. So what the operating budget stabilization fund does to help us get from override to override without cutting services, it's a bucket of money, is how I think of it. And in the early years, right after you have an override, you put money in your bucket of money. And then your costs go up faster than your revenue. And then in the second half, you build up this bucket of money and you take money out of that bucket of money to keep providing appropriate services to people. And then you can see, let's say we're in year three, we see what's gonna happen in year four and year five. We know we're gonna need an override after that. We prepare everybody, we say, we're gonna need an override after this bucket of money runs out. And then we have an override, or at least we ask for an override. That's ideally how it works. Let's look specifically at Milton's. Works a little bit differently than that picture I showed you, but it's the same idea. What Milton did was, when we passed the override, $700,000 of what you voted on that ballot, went to the operating budget stabilization fund. And that goes up by 2.5% every year. That's why it looks like it goes from 700,000 to 800,000. We also, at town meeting last year, took free cash, which is one-time money, and just in the same way that we sometimes deposit free cash into other town stabilization funds, we put $2 million into this fund to seed it, to get it started. And then at town meeting later this week, if town meeting approves their proposed budget, we'll put another $1 million in there. So, and I'm not, in my forecast, I'm not assuming any more free cash goes in. It might, but I'm not assuming that. So assuming that, and I've got an assumed withdrawal pattern that has it sort of stepping up by the same step size every year. And I say, okay, here's how it works. It goes up the first couple years, and then the fund goes down, and then it runs out, and then we would need another. So that's how Milton's operating budget stabilization fund works. Now, one question that we're gonna have to, there are some questions that we need to figure out about the operating budget stabilization fund that the town has not settled on, and I want us to sooner rather than later. One of the biggest questions, possibly the biggest question, is how fast are we gonna spend down this operating budget stabilization fund? When I say we have to make a decision, first of all, who is we? Who makes this decision? It's not 100% clear, but I would say this is a policy decision. Usually town policies live with the select board, and this decision is very closely related to the question of future overrides, which is also a select board decision. So the Warrant Committee is very happy to advise and give suggestions. This seems like this is a select board decision of specifically this question of how long do we want the operating budget stabilization fund to last? And we can't put off this decision because this decision is a big determinant in how much of the operating budget stabilization fund we will have in next year's FY28 budget. We're gonna go to town meeting a year from today, be voting on a budget then. We need to know how much money from that fund is gonna be in that budget. So I apologize that I'm gonna go from right to left. Please forgive me. But if we want the operating budget stabilization fund to last through 2030, then next year when we're putting together our budget for FY28, we'll have $1.4 million to spend. If we want it to last through 2029, we'll have $2 million to spend. If we want it to last only through 2028, we'll have $4.5 million to spend. Now, I'm gonna say more about these three options in the next few slides. The main point of this slide is that we need to make, again, someone in town needs to make a decision about how long this operating budget stabilization fund is intended to last. That decision will have a direct impact on the budget we make next year. So this isn't a decision we can put off for years. It's not even a decision that we can put off till next spring. This decision should be made this summer or very early fall before we even start the budget process. So it's an input to next year's budget and not a reaction of looking at the budget. So, and whatever, I'll caveat with whatever decision is made this summer, once we start putting together the budget, I think should have some flexibility, but we should have a target in mind when putting together the budget for next year. So, again, I'll be saying more about these three scenarios. The point of this slide is a decision has to be made on the soonish side. I did have here that I could pause for questions. I realize that I've been talking about this mysterious fund. It's fine if you just want to absorb it and let me go on to the next few slides. Yes?
Just a point of clarification, so
Sure.
last year, it was a roughly $9 million override. Did you, what I just saw, that 2 million of that went into the rainy day fund?
Nope, good question. It was a $9.5 million override. $8.8 million goes to the general budget.
Okay.
700,000 is going to this rainy day fund, as you call it. And then we had free cash. So from the previous year, we did better than budget. So we have one-time money. We can spend that one-time money on, we can use it to buy various capital expenses. We can use it to put in various reserve funds. What we did was we put $2 million of that free cash, the one-time money, into this account. And then this year, again, we have free cash from coming in under budget last year.
Couldn't we have given that back to the taxpayers, $2 million, and cut the 9 down to 7 million?
No, I mean, the $9 million is ongoing every year. This is one-time money. So we're, when we were looking at our budget earlier this year, my feeling was we were free cash rich, but ongoing budget poor. We had, because of prudent budgeting, because of conservative budgeting every year, we have a few $1 million in free cash every year. But that's not dependable money you can count on year in, year out. That's why we spend on one-time things like capital expenses or putting aside into various reserve funds.
Way to get that? Doesn't make sense to me, but.
I mean, yeah, it is a question. If you look at the free cash for the past several years, we've had over $1 million in free cash the past several years. The counter argument to that is it's a $150 million budget. The fact that our financial people can get us that close is amazing. And you want them to get us that close and not the other direction. They never want to be under budget. So they somehow manage it so that we're a little bit over budget. And then we use that to spend on one-time expenses. John?
But I think that's what you just mentioned about trying to get together to get a handle on the next, whether we go 4.4 or 2 or 1.4. Is that what you're referring to on page 14 here? You talk about getting together with the town administrator and revised forecast for towns. And forecast will necessarily go hand in hand with revised plan for the override. Is that what you're referring to?
Probably, I wrote that a month ago, but yes,
Okay.
I think it's all.
It sounds like
it's all of the same.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna keep going with momentum here. So, what are we looking at in the future? All right, one thing I will say is, all right, sorry, I'm comparing my notes to my slides. Oh yes, so one thing that, I'm gonna talk about what I'm not talking about. The town will have other financial pressures in coming years, so I'm gonna be talking about what we're seeing coming up, maybe possible future overrides. What I'm not talking about is some of these future overrides. We expect, given what may be starting at town meeting this week, we might be redoing our third fire station, which would have a debt exclusion override. We might vote on that later this year or next year. Don't know exactly how much that would affect the tax levy. We may have a new school coming up. If so, that would have to be put to a vote. That new school would come with operating expenses. I'm assuming those would be an override vote also. None of what I'm talking about is going to include any of these. And also what I'm talking about, so not only do I not include the math, I'm also not including the political questions. Like, people look at this and look at what I'm about to talk about and say, is it worse to have 2 overrides in 1 year or 2 overrides 2 years in a row? I'm not even thinking about that. I'm laying out the math and saying, here's what I see for coming year's budgets. And as I said a few minutes ago, all of this excludes one-time revenue, one-time expenses. It's ongoing revenue and ongoing expenses. So, let's see some things. So what if we're talking about 2030? So we have this operating budget stabilization fund. Part of my brain is aware that one member of audience just came in and I'm just gonna have to leave him behind. Sorry, I can't explain everything to you. Apologize. So we have an operating budget stabilization fund. What if we want it to last until 2030, using the payout pattern that I showed a few slides ago? Well, so here's this graph. We've got revenue coming in, we've got the operating budget stabilization fund. The line is the level of service expense. Goes up. The blue bar is our revenue coming in. The black line is our expenses going out. As we know, the expenses go up faster than the revenue. In 2027, it's entirely made up by this operating budget stabilization fund. Okay. Well, if we spread the operating budget stabilization fund out over the next 3 years, we get shortfalls. We get a shortfall of $2.5 million next year, going up to $6.4 million in FY30. Sometimes I have a hard time wrapping my head around $6.4 million on a $150 million budget. What does that mean? One way to think of it is if we have to cut expenses by $6.4 million, ballpark, round numbers, let's say an employee costs $100,000, salary plus benefits together. I'm not saying that's a good number, I'm just saying it's a round number. An employee costs $100,000, that means next year we'd have to cut expenses by the equivalent of 25 employees. In FY30, we'd have to cut expenses by the equivalent of 64 employees. Whether that's actually losing people or losing services in some other way, that's gonna be a hit. So this is not a scenario that the Warrant Committee explored that much further. You know, this is as much math as you're gonna see in this, because this is significant hits over the next 3 years. So let's say we want the operating budget stabilization fund to last till 2029. Okay, again, we've got, you know, $3 million of seed money in here. So the less years we spread it out, the more we can help in every year. This looks better. So now, again, I want to be clear about what I say. When I say target year 2029, what I mean is the operating budget stabilization fund will last through fiscal year 29. And you know, unless we have good luck, which we might, but if we assume that that's the year we're going to be looking for an override, we'd be looking for an override in the spring of 2029 to help us for fiscal year 30 budget. That would be 3 years from today would be an override, 4 years from the last override. Now, if we look at this, there's still red between the revenue we bring in and the operating budget stabilization fund. There's still a shortfall. It's a shortfall of about $2 million next year and a little less than $4 million the year after that. So town and school departments would take a hit. There would probably be a reduction in services and staff, again, unless we get lucky with certain assumptions, like state aid or health inflation. We might weather this with minimal reductions, but we might not. You know, if the dice goes our way, we could get through this with minimal disruption. If it goes as expected, we would have a hit to probably employees and probably services. What if the dice really doesn't go our way? What if there's a recession? What if the recession leads to the state reducing our state aid like they did last time? I don't know. This is but unlike the last one where it looked like we have catastrophic shortfalls for 3 years, we have some shortfalls for 2 years. So this one I do look into a little bit more on later slides. And then the final option is, what if we want the operating budget stabilization fund to last through 2028? We're using some of it in FY27. We use more of it in FY28 to make up the entire shortfall for the level service expense. And then we would be looking at another override. That would be an override in the spring of 2028, 3 years from the last override, 2 years from today. We can cover our level service needs with this. Now, this is where I want some feedback on, do these slides make sense or not? So cheer or boo as you see fit. So one one thing that I think is relevant, if we're talking about looking at the next override, I think it's prudent to ask how large might that override be? To give the town of some sense of what we're talking about. To build an override, I'm looking at two goals for an override. One goal is, if we're short 1 year, one goal for an override is bring services back up to what would have been level service. For example, think of if we had to lay off people to cut our expenses, let's say we hire those people back. If we close the library on the weekends, we reopen the library on the weekends. So again, going back up to what would have been level service, and we'll also need to fund an operating budget stabilization fund to provide level service until the next override. So I'm gonna build this override step by step. Step one is, well, what were we short in the previous year? In the previous year, we used some money from the operating budget stabilization fund, that's gone now, so we need the override to cover that. And we also had a shortfall from what should have been level service. We need the override to cover that. I will say, when I'm talking about need and all of this, the override size will be determined by a future select board, not by me. So I'm just giving sort of guidelines of what people might think of when they're thinking about a future override. It's gonna be a future select board that decides the actual number. But I'll say, what do we use for operating budget stabilization fund? We need to make that up. What was a shortfall and what we couldn't meet a level of service, we'll need to make that up. Piece number two, and then year to year, our needs go up. Our needs go up, our revenues go up. So the net of that, okay, our override will need to cover that. And finally, everyone in this room is now experts on operating budget stabilization fund. So now they know that in the year of an override and the early year after an override, you put money into the bucket to fund later years. So we'll wanna put another, have the override be a little bit bigger to put money into the bucket so we can continue providing services over the next few years. All of that, where does that bring us? This slide doesn't have numbers, it just has feelings. Feelings are, this is my example of target year 2029. A little bit of a shortfall in 28, a little bit of shortfall in 29. The override pops us up so that in FY30 and FY31, we're putting money into the bucket of money. FY32, it's about of a wash, and FY33 and FY34, we're pulling money out of the bucket of money, and we're able to provide level service until FY34 for that.
It's great.
That also has a star. Don't know if that should be a town meeting or not.
Jeez, I don't know, I like that one, Jay.
It doesn't have numbers. That's a big positive. Okay, this does have numbers. This everybody said, don't show these numbers. People will yell at you, but I'm showing them. One question that I sort of didn't pay a whole lot of attention to is how long do we want the override to last? The last picture I showed you had an override that was intended to last 5 years. It could be a little bit lower if it's an override only intended to last 4 years. So I've looked at a few different options. What if it's an override intended to last 5 years or 4 years? Well, if we wait till 2030, I didn't bother calculating that. That's pretty catastrophic impacts on the town for the next few years. I didn't calculate anything with that. We wait till 2029, when an override that's gonna last 5 years, it's 14.5 million. When an override that's gonna last 4 years, $13 million. And it'll be 2 years of belt tightening to get there. If we're gonna do an override in 2028, an override that lasts 5 years would be about 11.5 million. An override that lasts 4 years would be about 9.5 million. And we cover the lower service budget. It's, these are big picture numbers. They're not set in stone, but there's something to give us an idea of what we're looking at in the future.
Jay, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Deborah Felton, Precinct 2 Town Meeting Member, 20 Willoughby Road. If there was I want to compare these numbers to the number that was talked about last year, but was never, it was decided that
Okay.
9.5. What was the higher number that would have definitely put us in a different conversation? Do you know what that number is?
I mean, off the top of my head, it was around 11.5 or 12.
No.
John, do you remember? Okay, yeah, I know there are a few different options discussed.
What you sounds about correct.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And I think that would have led to increased services also, which we can, debate if we would have liked to pay more for increased services, but So I don't know what it would have done to this picture, cause we would have been bringing in more money and spending more money. So I'm not sure exactly what it would have done. Okay,
Thank you.
sure thing. Which slide am I on? Oh. Okay, the next 4 slides, I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna have a town meeting and won't even waste a whole lot of your time. It's how I calculated these numbers. Again, I sort of led you through how I'd calculate these numbers. Here I'm just proving it because I did the work and I want credit for it. So 2029 override looks like that if it lasts 5 years. If it lasts 4 years, it doesn't have to be as high. Makes sense. 2028 override, the last 5 years. I'm gonna be putting these slides on a web page in case that wasn't clear. But you know, that I'm showing you how I got to these calculations. Okay, so here's an important slide. What could change these forecasts? And I'll be honest, I'm almost as worried about being too cautious as I am about being not cautious enough. I don't wanna be the boy who cried wolf. I don't wanna say we've gotta take drastic measures because everything's gonna be horrible, and then things might be better. So what might lead to better changes, what might lead to worse changes? Health insurance we've talked about. And I think I said, you know, some of these slides got 7 years. I certainly hope health insurance isn't 8% inflation every year for the next 7 years. But in the short term, I don't know what it'll be. It might be 10% next year. I don't know. So health insurance is a big unknown. State aid is a big unknown. There are people pushing for more. If we have a recession, we might be out of luck. I am mentioning free cash. Free cash doesn't directly affect members here, although it could indirectly affect things if we have, like we said earlier, if we keep consistently having a few $1 million of free cash every year, we can put some of that in the operating budget stabilization fund, which then flows through, makes everything good a little bit nicer. But then this year in particular, we got really lucky with snow and ice the previous 2 winters. This year, not only do we have snow and ice events, but they often happen on the weekends, which makes everything more expensive. So this
Jay?
year, yeah.
I'm so sorry. When you turn to the screen, the folks on that Milton Access can't, you go quiet.
Thank you for telling me. Okay, alright. I'll keep the hand gestures and the turning around to a minimum. Again, free cash doesn't directly affect things, but it can move our budget in general. New growth was a key assumption. One way that can move positive is we've got these new buildings being built. I'm not an expert in how those are valued and put on the tax rolls, but I think, you know, when they're partially built, we tax them partially. When they're finished being built, we tax them fully. And then when they're finally for sale or rent, I think the tax evaluation may go up. I don't, yeah. Big picture, I think that's maybe how it works. Don't ask me for the details. But new growth also might be optimistic in that once these buildings are built, we're sort of, knock on wood, hoping not a whole lot of 40Bs are coming up after that. So then that would, you know, maybe slow down our new growth. One positive change, I mentioned earlier that I was an actuary, so employee turnovers are a thing I think about. When you look at employee turnover, one of our members on the Warrant Committee noticed that our average teacher pay in the previous 5 years has been pretty high, and the 5 years before that it was pretty low. I'm not sure, but I think it might be due to when we have higher paid older employees retire and they get replaced with new lower paid employees, that's a big deal. That's a significant reduction of your total payroll. But you know, and that is baked into, I told you we got the school forecast. They put in a number to account for that, but you know, we could have higher turnover. We replace higher paid employees with lower paid employees, that's gonna help things. I felt a little sheepish about putting this last this last item in here, commercial development or pilot. These can of course help. I know some people in town always point to this as a solution to all of our financial problems. I guess I would say, if you're gonna point to this as a solution, please accompany it with some estimated numbers. For example, you know, I took a quick look at Extra Space Storage, which is one of our largest commercial taxpayers. They pay, you know, a little over $400,000 in taxes by my estimation. if we had another extra space storage somewhere in town, not even addressing where it might go, okay, that would be another $400,000 a year. That's great. That could really help us. But it wouldn't change the big picture that we saw. It wouldn't change the fundamental issue of the costs going up faster than expenses. So I'm fine with reasonable commercial development. I'm fine with getting more pilot payments. I'm a little wary of those being the solution to our problem. I think our problem is just that our income is limited and our expenses go up with union contracted salaries. So we're coming to the end. Some things to consider for the override, you know, again, override planning. These are not things that have to be decided anytime soon. Things we want, you know, do we want an override to last 4 years or 5 years? Again, that might be the difference between going to the taxpayers and saying, we want $9.5 million again, or we want $11.5 million. That's a decision. Also, one thing, all of the numbers I've been talking about tonight, all of them are level service. You know, we're gonna keep the same number of employees, we're gonna keep the same general level of service. Is that what we want? I think everyone, whether you think it's a good idea or not, I think everyone can agree the town could benefit from spending more money on police, fire, library. Council on Aging could certainly use some more money. Obviously, the schools are the elephant in the room. All of these would provide better services if we provided them more money. I don't know if that means we should or not, but it's something to think about. When thinking about budgeting for the next few years, when thinking about, do we want an override? Do we want to continue level service? Do we want to have a little bit more? I don't have an answer to that question tonight. I'm just saying that affects the numbers that I showed you. I've got a place for questions, but we're almost at the last, well, this is the last slide, so I'm just gonna skip ahead to summing up. We're in good shape for 27, but we've got budget issues coming. Everyone in this room is now an expert on the operating budget stabilization fund. You could talk about it with your friends and neighbors. And we need to plan ahead. The Warrant Committee is officially asking the select board to make some decisions regarding the use of the operating budget stabilization fund by the end of the summer to help us plan for next year's budget. And that is, oh, and then I'm showing off my work again because I did it and I'm proud of it. And these will all be on the website. So I'll open it up to questions, comments. I know we have some members who joined halfway through. Feel free to ask whatever you want. If I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know the answer. I noticed one of our members has a comment. Brian?
Hey, Jay, thank you. Jay, first off, sorry I can't be there. I'm pretty ill, but I want to say I'm really impressed with the amount of work you put into this, and I've seen all your iterations before. It's an incredible amount of work that you did to do this.
Okay, thank you.
But I got some comments.
Yes, please.
One thing is, and I brought this up at our budget meeting that we have on the budget committee meeting last week, and I want to reiterate this to the warrant committee. So under Proposition 2.5, where revenue sources can only grow 2.5%, I know that's obvious. And the reason that they have that is like in the United States, that's what the average person's salary increases every year. It's 2.5 to 3%. That's normal, unless you get obviously a better job or something like that. But those are normal increases. And when talking to the school, they have a 10-year average increase in their budget of 5.1%. And they're saying that's their reasoning for having that for future increases. They have 5.2%, but that's their reasoning. It's like that's what the historical increase has been in our school budget. So that's what I'm going to use. And but if you go back 10 years, which is what they're basing it on, like 8 to 10 years ago, we had a 10% increase in student population in the schools. 4 years ago or 5 years ago, we had opera money. And then we had I think we had an increase one year of 8.8%. Inflation was like 8% one year, like 2 or 3 years ago. And we had high inflation years, and they increased accordingly to that. And over that 10-year period, though, the average Milton teacher salary went up 2.5%. The average Massachusetts teacher salary went up 3%. So somewhere, and I know they have steps, we all know about the steps, but their average is like 2.5 at the bottom probably, but somewhere to 3%. I should also add that they're projecting the student population is projected to decrease, according to NASDAQ, about 3% over the next, I think it's 7 years. So my question that I have a problem with, I know that they're using the 5.2% as an average of their school increase budget because that's what it was over 10 years. But there's legitimate reasons for that. But I don't know why they would be more than, if you say the average teacher salary would be 3%, why would they be increasing it? Like, where's that other 2.2%? What is that for? What is that targeted to? And I struggle with that. And I haven't heard them explain it, except that's what it's been. So that's what we think it's going to be. But there's reasons that they had a big jump. And it kind of troubles me because the last override was 9.5 million. And that was the third highest in the state. We're a population of 28,000, I think. That's the third highest in the state. If we go to 14.5 in 3 years as an override, that's going to be, we're going to have like the first and the fourth highest within a 5-year period override. And that's that 2% that's driving it, that school budget of 5.2%. And that's my struggle with this, is I've brought that up at other meetings, is where is that coming from? What is that for?
Yeah, I hear you, and you.
I know it's not your number. I'm not putting you on
No,
the spot.
yeah.
You're getting it from them.
Yeah, you've raised some good points, and you've made me think about some things, and I appreciate that. I guess a couple thoughts. One, it's all driven by, union negotiated contracts governing the pay. That's what it's driven by, and to another extent, it's driven by, what I said about turnover. If you've got a cohort of a lot of older teachers who are retiring, replaced by younger, lower paid teachers, you're going to have a lot less than that. If you don't have many people retiring this year, you're going to have a lot worse than that. I guess my response, and it's sort of a response to what you're saying, but it's sort of not a response to what you're saying, is they're telling us 5.2% for level service. So we're going to be saying, we meaning the town administrator, meaning the select board, and meaning the warrant committee, are going to be saying to them next year, what do you need for level service? And when we say level service, we mean the same number of teachers and the same amount of services, so to speak, for the schools. And they, meaning the school administration, meaning the elected member of the school committee, need to tell us, this is what we need for level service. Or they might say, this is what we need for level service, plus we've got an extra 30 English language learners and they need an extra English language learner teacher, so we had to have that, we didn't have a choice. Things like that. We've got to hold them to, is this level service? If it's not level service, let us know. It might be some sort of state mandated increase. But if they really stick with level service, same number of teachers, same level of service, and if it goes up by 5.2%, then that's what it goes up by. If if they're trying to sneak in extra employees without telling us, that's a bigger problem. I'm not really worried about that. I think when we ask them, give us a level service number, they'll give us a level service number. And if it's not 5.2%, then everybody wins. I know that's not what you were asking, but I think you're saying if in reality, it's not gonna grow that much. My response is, if they really give us a level service number, and if in reality it's not that much, then that's great. And like I said, I'm afraid about being the boy who cries wolf. I'm afraid about saying it's all gonna blow up and it is all fine. So you raise a good point. That's all I got.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So we're at the end of the presentation. Comments, questions from the audience? Yes.
There was a section there where you talked about a lot of the unknowns that come up.
Okay.
And one of the ones not mentioned that's huge in the schools is special ed. My wife was a special ed teacher and it's unpredictable, very difficult to predict, You know, that's
You're
one
right.
of those wild, you just don't know. And I'm sure that affects their budget.
You're right, and yeah, that's why I sort of hedged a minute ago when I said, if we ask them to need level service, we expect them to do it, but if, you know, if you've got an extra handful of kids who need expensive services, we can shake our finger at them and say, give us level service budget all we want, but they gotta spend it, they gotta spend it. Which I will say, I said the schools are building up a reserve. The schools are building up a reserve to cover unexpected special ed expenses on their side of the finances, and we'll talk about this more at town meeting. Also on the town side of the finances, we're putting in $500,000 into a special education stabilization fund that is under the purview of both the school committee and the select board. And I think I haven't checked recently, but I think they're coming up with a strict policy, or not ironclad strict, but relatively strict, like, you know, if your special ed costs were X amount last year and they're Y amount this year and it goes up, then that's the amount that can come out of there. If anyone in this room wants to speak to that, okay, Ms. Haggerty, you don't have to. Fine.
right now,
That's fine, totally fine. Sorry, I apologize for putting you on.
I like jokes.
But yeah, the town has at least 2 buckets of money that are there for unexpected special ed expenses, but yeah, you're right. And I will say, when the town gave us that forecast showing it's gonna go up by 5.2% a year, baked into that was an inflation factor for the special ed. It's up. Yes,
Is there a way, so, you're talking about a new fire station,
okay.
new school, possibly on both. So I think I read in the warrant where the operating budget for the fire department has gone up because of the new buildings. You know, they're more expensive. So I'm wondering if there's a way to forecast that for other new buildings that could, maybe not right now, but in the
Yeah.
future when we're looking at those.
That's a good question. I did have for the school budget, and you know, don't take the $1.5 million to the bank, but that's a high level number that I heard of, because you think about the new school especially, we're just moving kids around. We hopefully don't have to hire too many teachers. We just move the teachers around. What we have to hire is a principal, a custodial staff, a cafeteria staff, and pay the electric bills. So that's what I think the $1.5 million is there for. That's just a placeholder. Very surely change. So then that leaves the fire station.
And we'll have East Milton coming on also,
Yeah,
which will
I don't
be
know, and
increased expenses.
I apologize, I don't remember the fire station comment about the new buildings. Do you remember that, Larry?
Yeah, it was a small amount, but it was one of the reasons why their budget went up. was
Yes.
Because of
Yeah.
the cost for this fire station next door here. But I don't remember exactly what the amount was. But it is something to consider for sure.
Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, if I could, I'd love to be able to answer thoroughly the question just raised. But I do have some exposure to what's going on with the fire stations and new buildings. The station next door, first thing which is not obvious, is it's a much larger building. Because in fact, a fire department today, even compared to 15 or 20 years ago, is a different, their services are very different. They're more of a full service health provider, not just go out to put out a house fire. The building is a lot larger because they store a lot of equipment, so you have a lot of costs that just naturally will go up because it's a lot larger building. But think of that. The East Milton station, which we expect and hope to be completed in November, it's really just, it's only a 2-bay station, much like the station that it's replacing. The staffing is gonna remain the same. That building's probably not a lot larger. In fact, it's interesting, as the question was raised, I started thinking I should probably know what the square footage of the old building and the new building are to compare them. If I had to guess, they're similar or the new one is no bigger. so the big costs are, for example, East Milton has one fire engine that has to respond, right? Well, the way fire engines work, by the way, when you retire one, they're not worth a lot on the market. There aren't a lot of people out there buying old fire engines. And also, it's good for a department to keep spares, because all of us own vehicles, you know, you might go out someday to start your vehicle and there's an issue and you can't use it. Well, the fire departments can't just say, oh, well, you know what, we're not gonna respond to your fire today because we're having trouble with the fire engine. So they keep the old ones, which they can't get a lot for on the open market, and they use those as spares to be ready in case of emergency. So East Milton has 2 bays, new station. There'll be an old engine in that extra bay as well as a new engine that's typically used, or a newer engine. And then lastly, I just wanna take the opportunity to make the comment, Mr. Chairman. The new station that we're planning in Atherton Street, we're gonna go to town meeting, and I know the Warrant Committee has supported us, and I appreciate that very much. We're gonna ask for the remainder of the funds we need to complete the design. We made a decision, we looked at 7 options of what to do with Atherton Street, and it turns out the cost differences were not dramatic between the options, and one of the options was we could save the old building, which, you know, has a lot of historical significance. We're gonna do that, but the point I wanna make here, and I will share with the town meeting audience, given the opportunity. We have applied for community preservation funds when we have to finish the application in September, so that when we come back to the town to ask for the funding for that station, we don't have the number nailed down. We've asked for 3 million. The Community Preservation Stabilization Fund is allowed now. Maybe they always were allowed, but they're about to start doing now. When they commit money to a cause, they won't just commit that year's available money. They'll be able to actually, you know, project out. So if they were to give us 3 million, they might say, we'll take 10 years to pay that 3 million back. And so what they're really doing is dedicating 1/10 of the cost of every year from that fund. I just some interesting facts.
Save something for town meeting. Can you state your name and address, please?
Oh, I apologize.
No problem.
Brian Walsh, I'm a Precinct 8 town meeting member and chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee. My apologies.
Address?
56 Pleasant Street.
Okay.
Jay, just so you know, it's the comment on page 31 where you mention the increase in utilities and maintenance operating costs for the fire department, and then it's general expenses increase.
Those comments were a team effort, so that's why I don't have it at the tip of my fingers.
So it's me. Like I listed the exact number though.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions coming up. Okay, tell your friends. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them they can watch this video between now and town meeting.
Right,
And they'll get a shorter version of this slideshow at town meeting.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming out.
All of you.
We'll, stop. I need a gavel to get you to stop doing that. That's all that's on our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.